thank you for joining our EBEX webinar this afternoon. My name is Jeremy Schmid, and I'll be joined by Paul Alderdice and Will Lavery, two of our senior consultants here at EBEX. Our topic for the webinar is going to be reconciling inventory and WIP values and how that impacts the general ledger. We think there's a lot of great content here because this is one of the most frequent questions we're getting from our customers. And we thought this would be a great platform to share some of that industry knowledge that we gain working with this very issue. Before we hop into the presentation, I just want to give a quick overview of EBEX. So EBEX is a gold partner that offers the total Microsoft business solutions. What makes EBEX a little bit unique is that we offer our solutions on a global level. Our main areas of focus are ERP, CRM, and BI. Within ERP, we focus heavily on AX and Navision. And on top of those three main areas, we also handle private and public services as well as Azure deployment. I just want to highlight a few of the awards we've won just to indicate the type of reputation we have within the partner network and also in Microsoft. In 2013, we won the Microsoft Partner of the Year Award, and in 2015, we won the Inner Circle for Microsoft Dynamics Award. And this is actually an award we've won 5 years in a row. And what makes this award a little bit more unique is that it's only given to the top few percentage of Microsoft Dynamic partners. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Paul, who's going to start the presentation. And again, thank you for joining, and we hope you enjoy the content.
I'm Paul Alderdice. I'm a solution architect here at EBEX. I've been with EBEX 15 months now. Prior to that, I've been in the AX world for over 10 years. I started with AX4, primarily focusing on finance and project accounts. As Charlotte suggested, we've got one of the hot topics, especially with the advent of AX 2012 and even R3, is how do you make sure that your inventory subsidiary ledger is equal to your general ledger, and what do you do if it isn't? So there are a lot of presentations out there, I think, about some of the tools, the inventory, but the concept of how to fix it, I think, hasn't been properly addressed. So if we can do the next slide. Can I have a next slide, or do I have to do it? Hello?
Yeah, do you see it?
I just see the first steps. So okay, so we're now I can sort of see it. So if we can get that slide a little bit more focused, the steps to close inventory. Okay. The steps to close inventory haven't changed in AX 2012 as opposed to the other ones. It's a 3-series parts. You are going to check open quantities, and if we can go to the next slide. It's also an inventory adjustment closing part. You're going to check open quantities, check your prices, and then do your inventory recalc and close. So in the check open quantities, this produces a report where items that aren't fully settled by the inventory close will not be, the items that won't be settled by the inventory close are outlined. So these are usually, as it says there, the items were physically updated but not financially updated. So if you've got a receipt of one and you have the financial, let me explain the difference between a financial close and a physical close. A physically updated inventory item is an item that has been received, but you don't have the invoice for it yet. When you get the invoice, either from a purchase order or from a sales order, that item becomes financially updated, and as far as AX is concerned, is it can be closed. It can't be closed until you get a financial update. So this report will show an item. If you purchased an item of 10 and you've only got a financial quantity of 3, it'll show you 3. And the purpose of this report is pretty much so that you can distribute it to people who have the ability to close your items, because the inventory close process is time consuming, and we want to make sure that it comes in as best as we can. We don't have any open items. We don't want to run it several times. In most companies it isn't. So you want to send this report to people who can either end production orders or invoice sales or process a purchase order invoice. And if you just transfer title to me, if you transfer to me, I'll show you, I'll do it part of a demo here. So can you see my screen now? Show my screen, okay. So where we go on this is you go into inventory management and you go to the closing and adjustments, and you have an option here of either doing a recalc, which is a process by which AX, no matter what inventory methodology you're using except standard cost, AX does settles things during the month on an average cost basis. So in order to get your inventory trued up, as we would say, you have to run a recalculation process. The close procedure is its own recalc process. So that's what we will do here. So we would go into inventory close, and we would run this report, and then we would run close. If we can go back to the slide deck, because I don't want to run the open quantities report here because it'll take the rest of the seminar session. Sometimes it can run 5 minutes. So I have a copy of it in there. So if we can go to the next page. So here's an open quantity, a pretty simple one. It's showing that you've got 62 items of 5010, which is open. It hasn't been closed, and it may create a problem when your inventory close procedure. So you would want to send this to somebody who could close those, either invoice them or either sales invoice or purchase invoice them. So if we go to the next slide. So the next piece is you could check the cost prices. And what this report is going to do is it's going to compare the item in inventory against the item cost in the item master. And it'll flag any deviation based on the percentage that you calculate. So if we take a look down there, I mean, you have the inventory close date, you have the maximum deviation, so that if it's more than 50% here, it doesn't pick up, and the minimum deviation, which is 0, although I usually typically run it at closer to 5%. And so this report, we go to the next slide. So this report gives you the list of items that are where there's deviation. So it also will show you where in the item master you have a cost of 0. In most cases, almost all, I recommend that you have at least an item cost in the item master, because that basic cost is going to be used in the default transactions. And having a zero default transaction isn't, it doesn't work that well. So we have a couple issues here. We have a zero transaction. We have a deviation which is in excess of 50%. So we would want to take a look at that purchase order for the item 16 and see why the $10,000 cost is there. It could be a lot of reasons which we'll get into later. But we would want to do that before we run inventory close. If we go to the next slide. Like I said earlier, until the inventory close is run, Dynamics does postage transactions at an average cost. The inventory close, which is also a recalculation, settles the transactions based on the inventory valuation method that has been chosen. The only difference between an inventory close and an inventory recalculation is if you run an inventory close, you cannot post another transaction to that. You can't post another transaction to the inventory. You would have to undo the inventory close. Okay. I'm not sure what's going on now, but okay. So after the inventory close, it's no longer possible to post in periods before the inventory close date. Inventory close is reversible. You can cancel the calculation, like you can cancel a calculation for recalc. And inventory basically closes and recalc are irrelevant for companies on standard cost. So if you're on standard cost, you really don't need to worry about these items. You got other issues to worry about, but not these items. Okay. So the next is the tools for reconciliation. So AX 2012 has a series of new reports that are used to reconcile general ledger to the trial balance. And so it's the inventory value report and the potential conflicts reports. One's for the inventory to general ledger, one from WIP to the general ledger. So if I could get back to for the demo, if I could get back control. Show my screen. So the inventory value report is an updated report. In other systems it was called something different, but it was never really as good as it was for this. It's essentially, the inventory value report is essentially your subledger for inventory. So you've got to set it up based on your costing, in setup costing inventory values. You can set up a number of these reports. But what you do in this is you can set it up based on the transaction report, the posting date or the transaction time. You need to set up a main account. You can set up with a main account, sub account. Typically it's main account. And then you can have multiple examples of this report. So this one report is now set for inventory. Because I only value inventory by site, I only have the site here. And if I want the inventory to reconcile to the general ledger, I go here and I have to pull down an inventory, the general ledger inventory report. Now, the one caveat of this is when you use the inventory to the general ledger account must be a total account. So you can have a variety of accounts in the general ledger. You can have a regular account which carries transactions, or you can have a reporting account, or you can have a total account, which is the sum of one or more general ledger main accounts. So we'll do that. So I don't know why they use resource ID and resource group, but this is item ID and this is item group. And because I like to export them to Excel, I don't do a total. We of course want to summarize the physical and financial values. We don't want to include items not posted to general ledger because that's why we're doing this. And I like to have the average calculation there. So this is one of our reports just for the inventory. The other report could be for inventory and WIP. And then you would put here, of course, site. And then there's the general ledger accounts for those two. And if we can go back to the slide deck. So as I said, it's a subledger for inventory. You're going to be able to compare it to general ledger. So here's the setup. We can do the next slide. You can have multiple configurations as we saw. So this is the report. It gives you your item, your quantity, and your amount. Since I ran, this is the WIP report. This is the combined one. I also have the WIP on here. And so WIP is anything that has been picked for a production order but not yet ended. So that's a very technical definition of WIP. So if it's picked for a production order but the production order is not yet ended, it could be finished, but if it's not yet ended, it goes into WIP. And that's one of the things that can create the discrepancies between the general ledger and is production orders that aren't ended. So we can go to the next page. And so and then at the bottom here is the reconciliation to the general ledger. This report is the discrepancy is $1.08, which is wonderful, but more often than not, it's much higher than that. So this calculation will be at the bottom of the report. And the good thing about this report is it's something you can give to your auditors so that when you're being audited, they can see the reconciliation, the subsidiary ledger, and all the general ledger accounts. Next slide. So if you don't come to $1.08 difference, you need to run probably the potential conflicts report. This is a report that identifies the difference between the general ledger and inventory values, and it suggests some of the reasons why the example exists, why the discrepancy exists. The error messages can be somewhat cryptic, and they often revolve around posting profile changes. But the report will at least identify items where the general ledger and the inventory is different. Let's see the next slide. So this report identifies three items where there's a difference, and the items have to do with the fact that the error message gives you the idea that the product is a service order, but it's been posted to a main account that includes inventory. So these discrepancies arose because we took a service item and we posted it to a raw material or finished good inventory. So that's helpful. So if we can go to the next slide. Okay, so what can go wrong? More often than not, you've got posting profile issues. I don't want to go into posting profiles because that's a whole separate session of its own. But for anybody that's interested, we have a spreadsheet that tells you exactly what posting profiles you should use for each of the inventory types. You know, you have, if I can have back the, for a demo. So when you're looking at your posting profiles, you come down here. And you set up all your posting profiles from here. Occasionally, you can have a difference of where some go to WIP and some go to finished product, and that happens often. And also, you can frequently have a problem with this one right here, inventory expenditure for product. This should be going to an expense account. Sometimes people post it for a profit and loss account. So if we could go back to the deck. So posting profiles can be one of the big problems. And those problems will really differentiate between WIP and inventory. The second big problem is unit of measure problems. And these occur where, and they occur frequently, where an item is sold, let's say by eaches, but it's purchased by boxes of 12. And very frequently what will happen is that the price for the each will be put on the box or vice versa, so that you have a discrepancy between, you know, if you buy something in a box of 10 at $100 and you sell them for 10 on an each basis, occasionally what will happen is your box will be put in at 10 or your each will be put in at 100, and this will create a fairly significant problem. The third big issue of what can go wrong are legacy systems, data migration errors. This is for someone who's just going on AX or just upgrading. This is one of the biggest problems. You'll just have a data migration error. It'll be different. The cost of the item will be different than the item master. It could be corrupted data. It could be just wrong information. Posting of manual journals in the inventory accounts. Usually we prohibit this by putting by checking the box in the general ledger saying, you know, only system accounts. But if that box isn't checked, then occasionally a manual journal entry will come into the inventory accounts and cause some discrepancies. And then we have the issue of financial and physical posting issues, and that's largely, and Will is going to talk about this, an item where the production order has not been ended. Okay, so if we can go next. So what can we do to fix this? And so this is the big thing. Okay, so 3 basic items is how you fix this. You can either make a manual entry. So if you've got a journal, if you've got a discrepancy of $1,000 or $10,000, and you think it's an item that's going to correct itself, you could make a manual journal entry to an inventory account. Typically, it's set up purposely for that purpose, and it is just an item that it's an account that will accept manual entries, but will not be used in any of the posting profiles. So that's the first way to do it. The next way to do it is for production order updates. So you go through your production order and you make sure where it's ended, it's ended. It's not reported as finished. And so if it's reported as finished, it's still going to be in WIP. But if you sold it, then it's an item that's got to be moved to finished good inventory. And ultimately, if all that, you come down to an item, you can do an inventory adjustment. And if I can have the controls back. So what you would do here is you would go into inventory, and in order to hand an adjustment, you've got to have a close, an inventory close. So you go up here to adjustment, and you can either adjust on hand or the transactions. Typically, we adjust on hand and not transactions, but you would adjust transactions if you're doing a P&L and the P&L is way off whack because an item was incorrectly entered for whatever reason. But what you do here is you go to on hand, and unfortunately this is going to come up blank but you pick your item that you want, and then you would get some selections here. And then you can either adjust it to the item master cost, or you might adjust it to any cost that you want it to, or you can put in an amount or a percent. And then when you select that, when you run that, you would then post it, and whatever you had for the cost would then be reflected in your inventory value report. So when you then rerun your inventory value report, that new cost will be selected. So that's all inventory. I think Will's going to take over and show you WIP and production issues. So Will.
All right, thank you for that demonstration, Paul. My name is Will. I am a consultant in EBEX. I deal mostly with the production area, the trade and logistics portions of AX. Before I get started, I would just like to say there is a questions box in GoToWebinar. So if you do have any questions during the demonstration, your mics are muted, but feel free to type questions and we will try to get to them and answer them if possible. All right, so what I'm going to talk about is the production postings and the production process in sort of a standard AX environment. We're going to take raw materials and labor, and we're going to convert that into WIP, and then we're going to take that WIP and we're going to convert that into finished goods. We're not going to go over using costing sheets to set up overheads and different things like that today. So this is fairly simplified, but it gives you a good overview of the production process. And if we think about inventory in AX, we're adding items into locations, warehouses, sites, and we're removing items from locations, warehouses, and your different inventory dimensions. And the other areas where we do this are usually a lot simpler than production. So when we think about receiving a purchase order, it's a simple process. We receive it and then it gets invoiced. Or if we, deliver somebody a sales order, we pack it and then we invoice them. Well, production's a little different in that there's usually a lot of postings that occur during a single production order. You have lots of different items going in the production order, and you have lots of hours, usually from multiple resources, going into a single production order. And so this complexity can also oftentimes lead to some confusion. And so people have a little bit of trouble understanding what the production order is supposed to be doing, and then also going through the system and actually verifying that it did what they hoped that it would do. So if we look at our raw materials and labor to WIP, then WIP to finished goods, we're going to have several different postings that are going to occur during those steps. And the actual number of postings that occur is very dependent on the settings within AX. And the first setting to talk about, and this alludes back to when Paul was talking about physical versus financial inventory, and that is, are we going to post physical inventory to the GL? And this is an item model group setting. So for any of your items with an item model group where you're posting physical inventory, you have the option to have those postings hit the GL. So this would be something like receiving a purchase order, reporting as finished a production order, or packing a sales order. So these physical postings will occur if you have that box selected. And so that's your sort of global parameter. And you actually have, for each of those postings, you have their own parameter. So posting a picking list and posting reported as finished in the ledger. That is also a parameter. It's a production control parameter. And so what you do is you have the option whether or not you want your picking list, which are going to convert your raw materials and WIP, raw materials into WIP, posted to the ledger. And if you do, that's going to be a physical posting, which will later get updated with a financial posting when the production order is ended. The same thing with post reported as finished in ledger, and that's usually your finished good item. Are you posting that into the ledger or not? So we'll look at our physical material postings and raw materials to WIP. We just talked about this, but this is done through our picking list journal. And so what this does is it any of the items that were, or maybe not on the bill of materials, but used in a picking list, are going to credit the posting profile for picking list issue from the BOM item. So the item that you're actually picking, it's going to look at the posting profile and the setting for the picking list issue. It's going to credit that account, and then it's going to debit your picking list offset account, which is hopefully your WIP account. And your other physical material posting that can occur during a production order is going to be your WIP to finished goods. And this happens during the posting of the reported as finished journal within AX. And so what it's going to do, that's going to credit your reported as finished offset account from the finished good item. So whichever item you're making, that's where it's going to look for the production or the posting profile. And then it's going to debit your reported as finished receipt. And so what we can see here is that if we have a mismatch between these, your picking list offset account and your reported as finished offset account, if those aren't WIP, that's where some of that discrepancy that Paul was talking about can occur, where you're debiting in one account that you would think you'd be crediting in the next step, but you're not. So those are the physical postings, which we talked about are optional. And then there's the financial material postings. When I say material, I'm talking about items here. And this is another area where it's very confusing for a lot of users, because a lot of postings are going to get reversed. And so they're going to see a very simple order when they go to test, and it's going to have, I think it's, 8 or so, maybe even more postings for this one step. And the reason it does that is that it reversed all the physical postings. So instead of updating those postings to your realized cost amount, it actually just reversed those physical postings. So if people are having issues, one of the things we can do is we can turn off those physical postings so that this step becomes a little more clear, and we only post realized cost to the finished good item, and it can be easier for the user to see. Where we don't like to do that is if the user is going to transact on the finished good item before the production order is ended, because depending on what you do with that item, let's say you sell it, now you're selling that item at zero cost. So you sort of just propagate this error without ending your production order first. So once those physical postings are reversed, we've got our raw materials to WIP, and all these steps occur at the same time. We're going to credit the issue posting setup from the item on the bill of materials, and then we're going to debit the issue offset account from the bill of material item. And then immediately after, on the same voucher, our WIP to finished goods posting is going to occur, and that's going to credit the offset, the receipt offset account from the finished goods item, and it's going to debit the receipt account. So it's important to note that these financial postings aren't what updates your inventory quantity. Those are your physical postings. So those are what are going to allow you to do, to perform transactions on the item in the system, the finished good item, and your financial is what's going to truly realize the cost for the production order. And so whoever's ending the production order, you ideally have someone who understands, first of all, what the cost should be of the item, and who has time to review that cost and ensure that the hours, items, and such that were posted to the production order make sense so that they can end and financially update and say that this is how much the production order cost us. So that's really what you're doing when you're ended. You're tying a bow around that production order saying, I believe all the hours and parts went in here are correct, and therefore the cost on this finished good item is correct. So those are our materials, our items that get posted. We also have labor that goes into production order. So people and parts, or time and parts, and we'll have a finished good. So for our labor postings, we're going to look at cost categories. We have our labor to WIP, and this is our physical posting. So this is done either via a route card journal or a job card journal. And we're going to credit the WIP issue from our cost category, and then we're going to debit the WIP account from the cost category. So we'll look at setting up a cost category as well and where those account numbers are stored. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to have our WIP to finished goods, and this is done during the reported as finished. And we're going to credit and debit the same accounts. So this is going to be the same posting as before. It's just going to add up the material parts and the cost for the labor as well into that single posting where we're crediting our production offset account and we are debiting our production reported as finished. So when we end our production order, there is going to be the same reversal. So we're reversing any of those physical labor postings, and then we are going to redo those postings based on the resource issues from the cost category and the resource issues offset account from the cost category. And then just like before, our WIP to finished goods via the ending, we're going to have a single transaction where our labor and our items are added together to credit the receipt offset account and to debit the receipt account. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and take you into AX right now, and we can walk through some of these settings and look at a production order and see where it's posting. So the first thing of note is to look at the release product. I've got a very simple product we have set up. It's our finished good item. Okay, and if we look at the item model group, we can see that we are going to post physical inventory to the ledger. And so this is one of the first settings you want to look at, because there's usually companies have very few inventory models, and so this can be, this will have a very large impact. It's not just going to affect one posting. It potentially has the possibility to affect a lot of postings. Okay, so we see now that it's going to post physical inventory to the general ledger. So the next thing would be to look at your production control parameters. All right, and so what we have here is the postings. Post picking list in ledger and post reported as finished in ledger. So therefore we are going to post our picking list and our reported as finished journals into the ledger. And so there will be a physical update. The other thing we look at is here this use estimated cost price for reported as finished. This is really only important if you do have this selected. You're posting reported as finished. What that's going to do is one of the first steps in creating a production order is to go ahead and estimate that production order. And that's going to be based on the bill of materials and the route. And so when you use estimated cost price, whatever it was estimated at, that's what's going to post into your GL. If you have that deselected, it's actually going to look up the item cost from the item record itself. The other thing we want to be able to look at is our posting profiles. So we went through most of these on the slide and what they do and what they're used for. We can have them set up multiple ways, just like other areas in AX. We can have a global. We can have it default to an item group, item model group, or we could get it all the way down to just a single item. And so what you're going to want to do if someone's having issues is come through here, map those postings. We've looked at now where we know the system should be making postings, and then we can come in here and look at these accounts so we understand what accounts the system is going to be posting to. And so we'll go ahead and create a production order. All right, so we've got a simple created production order. And we'll go ahead and estimate this production order. Okay. And so the first thing we're going to look at is this price calculation on your view tab. Not a lot of people, or it seems like people don't know about this, but this is a great screen for figuring out cost on production orders. What this is going to do is it's going to list out all the items. I think your overview costing is probably your best tab. Your items, it's got their cost group, your estimated consumption, and your estimated cost amount. So this top one is the finished good item that we're making, and it's got an estimated cost amount of $42. And 10 of those dollars come from this part, or raw material part, which is the only item on the bill of materials. So we have one of those items. And then we have this resource group for 2 hours at $16 an hour. So it's got an estimated cost of $32. So that reminds me, I did not show the cost category yet. But if we look at our production route, or setup, I have set up here a runtime category. And we can see we have a cost price here of $16. And unlike the posting for the items, these are the accounts for our WIP. And then, so for posting the route card and job card journals, these are the accounts we're going to use. And then for the ending of the production order, these accounts are going to be the accounts that we use. We can also set up cost categories for either quantity or setup. So maybe your setup is less expensive, or maybe you're just doing a quantity. So your cost is per quantity. It doesn't matter how long it takes somebody. You're going to pay them the same, so your cost is the same. All right, so we can either schedule release, or start the production orders in this system to help save some time, or set up in such a way that we're going to go ahead and automatically post our picking list journal and our route card journal. And so I can go and view all the production postings, so all the postings that have occurred with this. And I would be able to look at the voucher for each one. So we've got our material, which would have been our picking list. And it's going to post to our production offset picking list type. And so those are our two posting types that are going to occur with the picking list journal. We obviously don't want to actually hit this account, but it was just set up that way in our environment to keep the numbers different. So we've got our WIP adjusted that we saw there. So the next step would be to go ahead and report this as finished. So we've posted our reported as finished journal. And if we look at our postings, we have our good quantity here of 1. And this is where we would like to see the credit of our WIP and debit of our finished goods. So that would be, as you can see, there's only one posting that's going to occur here, and that's for the items and the material combined. The next would be to end the production order. And that will allow us to view the rest of the postings that we would expect to occur. As we can see, we no longer have WIP because the production order has been ended. But when we do go to this voucher, even for such a simple production order, we have one item, we get quite a lot of postings here. And so these postings are reversing all the other previous postings, and then we're actually doing a posting from the raw materials to WIP, and then from WIP to finished goods for the materials, and then you usually have a labor account that you're crediting. You're going to debit your WIP, and then you're going to credit your WIP and then debit your finished goods. And so all those steps are occurring right here. So we're redoing all of our previous transactions. So that sort of is what I would go and look at if someone was having issues understanding their costing, their inventory in relation to the GL, especially if they were using production, possibly having some issues with that. You want to make sure you end as many production orders as you can. The sooner you end production orders, I feel that the better the system works. In other areas, your cost is usually more accurate once it's ended. Because like we saw, the ended is going to post your realized cost amount as opposed to either an estimate or what's defined on the item record. This can be very important for companies such as, if you're an engineer to order or configure to order, and you have somewhat variability in your price, and being able to end those production orders before you transact on them. It's not going to fix anything from being broken, but it does make the system easier to use and easier to find where the errors are. All right, so that is about all I have for today. Once again, the questions can be typed into the GoToWebinar box. So I don't know if anybody else has any questions, anything anybody would like to comment on. All right, I'm going to go ahead and unmute everybody. So if you are having a conversation right now, you may want to go ahead and mute your GoToMeeting, just to make sure there's no questions out there, or if anybody wants, sort of an open-ended discussion type question, we're free and available to talk. So. All right, well, if that's all for today, once again, my name is Will Lavery. I am consultant here at EBEX along with Paul Alderdice. Any next steps anybody would like to work with us on? We do, AX project audits, whether you're in your middle of an implementation, you had an implementation, and you went live, you're not sure really where you are. Is everything set up well? Things like that. If you're looking to upgrade either from a different system to AX, or you've got an older version of AX and you'd like to upgrade, we're here for that as well. Like Charlotte said at the beginning of the meeting, we are a full Microsoft stack partner. We deal in all areas of Dynamics, anything custom development, finance, trade and logistics, any areas that you may be experiencing pain points in. So once again, thank you very much for your time. My name is Will Lavery. I'm not sure, Paul, if you'd like to say goodbye.
No, yes, I've enjoyed this. If anybody would like a copy of the deck, please email us. I think you got our email addresses on the screen right now, and we'll forward you a copy of the deck.
All right. Thank you very much for your attendance, guys. Bye.
Thanks.